Welcome to our first Lunch and Learn of the year. We have four of them planned. We're going to be talking about neurodiversity affirming practices today. My name is Reiko Anderson, and I'm one of the district's AAC SLPs. My Instagram is at Reiko AAC SLP. That's my work Instagram. I'm not super active, but I do put things up there like remember to back up your talker before spring break and that kind of stuff. We do have a YouTube channel as well. Our most recent and most popular playlist is about backing up TouchChat to OneDrive using students' school OneDrive account. So on YouTube, we are at NVSD SLP, and we also have an NVSD SLP blog. In the blog, we updated it a little bit. We have a couple new tabs on the blog. One is a tab for our events, and another is for iPad troubleshooting. We were getting a lot of kind of similar questions, and what we'd like to do is sort of build your capacity so that you don't need to contact us when some things happen. So we have two resources that we've recently started sharing with people. These are on, if they're not on the blog already, I'll check after this, but they will be up there. And so this handout here, the idea with this one is you print it off and put it on a board, either the EA board or an LST board or something like that. And if you need something AAC related, the resources that we've made for you are available to you. So the first QR code here takes you to some handouts and the slide deck from the AAC. Oh, sorry. That's not what I was going to say. That's this one from the AAC Implementation Monthly Training. So that's what this QR code is for. This QR code is for our NVSD teams. We currently have an email list, but we've realized that when people reply to the email list, it goes to everyone, and not everyone wants that. So what we're going to do is phase out that list, and we're going to be using this NVSD teams instead. If you are in the school district, you should just be able to add yourself. If you're external, just send us a request through that QR code and we will approve you. This is a QR code to our YouTube channel, a QR code to our blog. This is the section of our blog with iPad troubleshooting, and then this is the section of our blog with events. And speaking of events, we have this handout here. This is our neurodiversity affirming practices that we're talking about today. And so if you're here, you've probably seen this already. We have 3 other sessions planned. So we have one on TouchChat editing, and we'll be covering things like creating a visual scene. And so it's not just adding a button, it's other ways that we can use TouchChat. We also have one coming up about communication strategies. Kim and I are going to record some video, hopefully, about communication strategies to demonstrate. And then this bottom QR code here, we have Lois Turner, who is the program manager at Kaya. She will be joining us in June. So that will be time for us to talk about the Kaya program, which is a publicly funded organization that supports AAC users after they leave high school. Actually, I should just say that they support adults using AAC. So if you have anyone in your life, not necessarily somebody that's transitioning out of high school, but if you have somebody in your life that could benefit from AAC, you could refer them to Kaya. So somebody with like aphasia or ALS or a brain injury, something like that might also benefit from AAC. So today we're going to talk about what is neurodiversity, what are neurodiversity affirming practices, and some barriers and tools. I found this, I attended a session on neurodiversity that was put on by Popard and ACT-BC, and they showed us this neurodiversity infographic. And instead of using the word neurodiversity, they used the word neurominorities, which I thought was really interesting. So what we're seeing is people talking about neurodiversities, not as something that needs to be fixed, but just as a, hey, we're all diverse, and that's okay. So one of the analogies that they used at the session I went to on Monday is handedness. So the vast majority of the world is right-handed, and a lot of things are made for right-handed people, like scissors. Now, it's a little bit rarer to be left-handed, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? And sometimes people who are left-handed benefit from specialized tools like left-handed scissors. It's even more rare to be ambidextrous. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these things. There's nothing wrong with being ambidextrous or left-handed. Sometimes we just need different tools. And the world is built for right-handed people. And we have to sort of be conscious of that and make sure that we're providing the right tools to support left-handed people and ambidextrous people. So in the same way, the world is made for what we call neurotypical people. And the social expectations are for neurotypical people. Yet we have all of these neurominorities in our communities, and there's nothing wrong with them. We don't need to fix them. What we need are some tools to help them. The session I went to on Monday also talked about high functioning versus low functioning and what we really mean when we say that. They were talking about how when we say high functioning, what's actually kind of meant is that they're high masking and they're um, possibly still struggling, but doing a lot of work to make it look like they're not. And so that terminology is also something for us to consider as well. So, what are neurodiversity affirming practices? You may have heard this terminology sort of around if you're doing sort of like online research about things like autism and autistic people, then often you're coming across this neurodiversity affirming practice terminology. But what does it really mean? I found this really, really great graphic online. And so we're going to talk about each of these points individually here. Number one, what we need to start doing is be informed by neurodivergent voices. So what does that mean? So, I'm not going to say that I am the expert in being somebody that's neurodivergent, for example. Ideally, what the people we are listening to are people with lived experience in these things that we're going to talk about today, but also people who can speak for other people when they can't speak for themselves. Some of the people that I looked at when I was preparing this presentation, were Adina Levy. She's an autistic SLP. Her website is Play Learn Chat, but mostly I went to Instagram, play.learn.chat. There's Emily Price. She used to have a different last name, and it's escaping me right now. She's also an autistic SLT. She's from the UK, so she's an SLT. Rachel Dorsey, who is also an autistic SLP. And the session on Monday that I went to was by Morinike, and she is absolutely amazing. She's an autistic author and an advocate. I think it's important that we're going to people who can speak to what it's like to be neurodivergent. Emily Price specifically has an entry on her blog called ABA PECs, and the reason that she finds PECs sort of problematic. So it's really, really worth the read if you go look her up. Some other neurodivergent AAC users that I follow on Instagram are Courtney Johnson, Just Keep Stimming, Lance Macklemore, Loud Lampman, Mateo Moreno AAC, Sabrina Guerra, SG Non-Speaking Advocate for Change, and Tiffany, Nigh Functioning Autism. Tiffany is especially interesting because she, when she speaks, when she uses her mouth words, you can't tell that she needs AAC, but she does use AAC, especially in things like presentations, answering questions during presentations. And so we'll come back to her in a second. But number two, take a strength-based approach. So I think we've started reflecting this kind of language in our IEPs, but I think that we could do better in our day-to-day lives. So simple switches for strength-based phrases. I found this online. So instead of saying somebody won't follow directions, we can try self-directed. Instead of so-and-so can't make friends, we can try they prefer independent play. Instead of saying somebody struggles with transitions, we can say they benefit from transition supports. And rather than saying, here are their deficits, we can try saying, here are their strengths. Instead of saying they are obsessive, we can try special interests include. And I know that this conversation is ongoing, and we might come back to something like this slide in 6 months, and sort of what the right thing is to say has changed, and it's constantly changing, and it's changing not based on what I have to say about it, but what AAC users have to say about it, and what other neurodiverse people have to say about it. So what is the right thing to say? Nobody prefers nonverbal. No, anything I've read or seen, AAC users do not like to be called nonverbal, and we need to stop doing that. One person's nonverbal, might be they only have 5 spoken words, and another person's nonverbal might be they have absolutely no spoken words. And so it's actually a little bit meaningless anyways, and it's not strength based. And AAC users don't identify as non-verbal. Some terminology that I've seen around are AAC user, multimodal communicator. Non-speaking is apparently preferred over non-verbal. Unreliable speech, which I thought was interesting. So, yeah, unreliable speech. Autistic is okay for some people, and disabled is okay for some people. But in my travels of having conversations with people, it can also really vary from individual to individual. So, whereas one person may prefer to be called non-speaking, somebody else might prefer to be called an AAC user. And some people would argue, some I would say neurotypical people would argue, but it's faster to say nonverbal. It's easier to understand. I'm going to counter that and say, I mean, I think that our AAC users, our non-speaking friends, they all deserve to be described in more than this like soundbite, more than just being called nonverbal. There's a lot of things that they can do, and we shouldn't just focus on the one thing they can't do. So again, I'm not trying to police this. I'm just trying to bring awareness from what I've heard from other AAC users about different strength-based terminology. Number 3, we need to tailor supports to individual needs. This is a very, very famous quote. I don't even know when the first time was that I heard it. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Everybody's needs are different, and we need to treat everybody as individuals. I think our IEP processes have changed quite a bit this year, and I think that captures a lot of individual variations. And so that was a really positive change that I saw this year. But we need to also remember that we need to be doing this and applying this in our everyday lives as well. Number 4, presuming competence. So presuming competence isn't about, say, assuming that everybody is able to get a PhD. Even within the neurotypical population, we would argue that that's not true. Presuming competence is about assuming that everybody has something to say and everybody can learn. So we take everybody where they are, and we always presume that they're going to move forward. So when we presume competence, we provide opportunities, we use the right AAC tools, we teach, explore, connect, and we allow time for communication to develop. So what does presuming competence look like? Presuming competence, there's a lot of overlap with this graphic and what sort of this overarching presentation is about. But presuming competence looks like using a strength-based approach, fostering an inclusive environment, providing opportunities, offering choices, supporting all forms of communication, and building authentic relationships built on safety and trust. Okay, number 5. This is, I think, possibly a big change for some people, but one thing that we need to really, really push strongly for is promoting autonomy of our students that are neurodiverse. So our AAC users, our neurodiverse friends, they all need to learn that you are the boss of your body. So when we think about sex ed, everybody learns that you are the boss of your own body. Yet for some reason, what I see with AAC users is a lot of people touching our students' bodies without their consent. So it might look like moving their hand, it might look like physically moving their body over. And that does not support bodily autonomy. The other thing is that we're often also telling our neurodiverse friends, hands to yourself. So we're telling them, you need to keep your hands to yourself, but I can touch your body. And you might think it's a really small thing that you're doing, but what we're what we're thinking about here is what is it that you're teaching your neurodiverse friends when you do touch their body, right? Maybe it is just a hand, but maybe somebody else comes along later and it's not just a hand. That's the other sort of fear. So kids really, really need to learn you are the boss of your own body. But some of you might have a huge background in this, and you might be saying, yeah, but it works. What we've heard from the autistic community is that this hand over hand can be quite traumatic for some people. Number one, they don't like it. Number two, it teaches them that people can touch their body. And those are neither of those are good things, right? So it used to be that we would talk about this kind of prompt hierarchy where we're providing full physical support and then partial physical support and moving on from there. But we're not talking about this kind of hierarchy anymore. Or I should actually say, autistic people are wanting us to not talk about this hierarchy anymore. Maybe it has worked in the past, but this can be quite traumatizing uh, for neurodivergent people. And people who are autistic are more likely to experience trauma and to experience things traumatically. Like that makes sense. So, like some of the things see here is due to the sensory profile, autistic people tend to encode traumatic events with more intensity. Autism is linked to higher rates of traumatic experiences and victimization. I'm going to send this slide out to you and you can have a closer look at it. But at the end of the day, like even if it does work, the potential of doing trauma is so great that I don't think it's worth it. And so my practice has really gone from I used to start with hand over hand and then really fade that prompt. And so I'm really not doing that with my students now. So promoting autonomy. I'm proposing this hierarchy instead. So we're going to focus on relationship and connection. That's the number one thing we need to do. Number two, we're going to model on our AAC systems without any expectation. So as I model, this is not an AAC system, but on my phone, I might model some words. And then I'm not going to say, now you say it. I'm just going to sort of be the narrator of my student's life and not expect anything in return. We're going to have interesting and engaging contexts. So that might include our friends' special interests. It might also, just be about introducing something new. Sometimes we've had the same activities for a really, really long time, and sometimes bringing in a new puzzle, bringing a new doodad from the dollar store, sometimes even hiding those things in a bag and saying, ooh, what's inside the bag? That can be an interesting and engaging context. We want to respond to any AAC use as meaningful, provide natural and targeted feedback. And then once you've done all of that, then you might provide some prompting and cueing. But at the same time, if you're doing all of these things, most of the time you're not even going to need to do any prompting or cueing. And number seven, and I'm going to say that this is the biggest one, and this is why I've left it for last, is to respect all communication styles. So I mentioned Nigh Functioning Autism on Instagram. Her name is Tiffany. She does talk about sometimes she is able to speak, and it is faster, and it is like the socially acceptable way to communicate. So she does recognize that, but sometimes it's not reliable for her, and sometimes she needs to use her AAC system. And I think that Tiffany is a great example of somebody that can sort of speak for herself and her perspective. And we can remember these things when working with other students. So you may have some AAC users that you work with who sometimes talk, sometimes use their mouth words, sometimes they use their talker words. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. I think that we used to sort of say, oh, you said it, but like, tell me with your talker. Like somebody might point and you might say, tell me with your talker. And then so the messaging sort of behind that and what an AAC user might take from that is you're not listening to me communicating, right? I just told you, how come you're not doing what I asked you to do? You understood me, but you're making me communicate with this AAC system. I don't want to use that AAC system, right? So, what our students need to know is that we're listening, we're here to work with them, not here to just like boss them around. And all communication is great. So, I found this online yesterday as well while I was making these slides. So, things not to say to an AAC user. So, find the, like a specific word. Find the more. Um, that's not right. Say it in a sentence. Now, say it on your device. Say this word. Now say it with your words. Hit the button, touch the button, right? That's not modeling. That is sort of kind of like testing and and kind of forcing one way of communicating more so than another. And so things that you can say instead of, I wonder if you mean this. I don't understand. Can you tell me another way? I see you pointing to the whatever. Here's where I might say that on your device. I'm listening. I wonder if you want something or something else. I hear you saying something. So, when I first showed you this slide about neurodiversity affirming practices, you may have looked at all the words and said, "Oh, that's a lot." But hopefully now I've broken it down for you, and you can see that it's not as daunting. You're probably already doing a lot of these things, and it's sort of about looking at your practice and making sure that we're being consistent and encouraging others to do all of these great things as well. So now that we've talked about that, I want to ask a question like, what do you think? Is implementing an AAC system a neurodiversity affirming approach? When I first heard about um, neurodiversity affirming practices, I kind of went, oh, am I like wrongly making somebody communicate? So let's think about this a little bit more. I'm actually going to think a little bit more broadly. So, what is the point of school? So, for our neurotypical students, we want them to learn foundational skills that they need to reach their potential in whatever they're going to do as adults. And for neurodiverse students, they need to learn the foundational skills they need to reach their potential in whatever they're going to do as adults. It's exactly the same, right? And so, what is life going to look like after they finish school? And before I go into the slide, I want to put in a plug. Our last Lunch and Learn in June is going to be with Lois Turner, who is from Kaya, and this is exactly what she's going to be talking about. And so please attend that as well. So what can life look like after school? Will they be working? Will they be independently taking the bus? Can they independently order at a restaurant? Can they hang out with friends and family? These are just some of the options of what we might be doing after we leave school. So let's think about this. So communication is going to be really important for all of these things, right? If I'm going to be ordering independently at a restaurant, like I go into Tim Hortons and I need to be able to order my double double, I'm going to need a way to communicate that. And if I can do it independently and I don't need someone else, that would be great. Numeracy. I need to be able to order, say, 2 double doubles and 4 Timbits or whatever it happens to be. But also, if they say that'll be $2,000, I need the numeracy skills to say, that's wrong. That should be more like, I don't know, I don't go to Tim Hortons very often, but $5 or whatever, right? So we need the numeracy skills to know the difference between $5 and $2,000. Literacy. Now, say somebody is going to be taking the bus. The basic routine is not that complicated, right? You get on the bus, you tap your card, and then you get to the place you're going to, and then you get off. I think a lot of students can learn that. The independent piece comes in when, like, when you go to the bus and there's a sign and it says the bus is not stopping here today, please walk to Lonsdale and 22nd and take the bus from there instead. A student, a person, needs to have the literacy skills to look at that and know and follow the directions and read that on their own if they're to take the bus independently. Social skills. And I'm not talking about like eye contact or anything like that. What I'm talking about is, how do I make a friend? How do I, when I'm ordering independently at a restaurant, I need to, wait for somebody to come over to me and ask me, can I get you something, before I tell them what I want? Those kinds of social skills. And the more fluent we are with all of these skills, the closer we can potentially get to this, to working. And so, if we want all of these things for our students, we need to be learning all of these things. So, when it comes to AAC and thinking about neurodiversity affirming practices, that AAC system is just a tool to support communication. So, absolutely, it is definitely a neurodiversity affirming practice. It will What is not neurodiversity affirming is for us to say it's the only way to communicate. One of the examples that I often use is saying hi to somebody. So you have a lot of ways of saying hi to people, right? Like you might say hi over text, you might wave to somebody from across the room, you might quite literally say hi to them face to face. Yet sometimes when I'm at school, a kid will make eye contact with me and wave at me, and then somebody will say hi to Miss Reiko on your talker, and I'm like, no, 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 they already said hi. That's cool. We're all good, right? That is an example of where we could be a little bit more neurodiversity affirming. We could really encourage that high, that hand. We're just providing a tool, and it's up to the student, the person, to communicate the way that works for them. So, how are we going to work on these things, right? We're going to set goals. And we do this all the time. We do this with IEPs. We need to start, we're now right here. Our long-term goal is here. And we're going to set a whole bunch of short-term goals and achieve them a little bit at a time. So when we go back, we look at this, maybe the goal is independently taking the bus. And so we need to work on our literacy skills to get us to that point. And so along the way, we're going to have a whole bunch of short-term goals. Maybe we need to learn to decode so that we can sound out the name of the street that's coming up. We need to maybe have some sight words. We need to have some comprehension. Those are all short-term goals under the one long-term goal of taking the bus. Another neurodiversity affirming approach is, the long-term goal is not like my goal. I'm not saying the ultimate goal is comprehension. The long-term goal might be for somebody to take the bus and for us to break down what are all the steps in there. As we're selecting activities, we also need to be making sure that we're sort of in that learning zone. Um, you know, you learn about this in school, right? In teacher school, and SLP school, in all the schools. But when we're working on a school, sorry, when we're working on a skill, uh, if it's too easy, it's a place of comfort, but we're not really challenging ourselves. If it's too hard, it's going to be absolute chaos, and we're not actually going to be learning anything anyways. What we want to shoot for are activities within this learning zone. Sometimes students have activities that they've aced and they're doing 100% of the time, which brings them into the comfort zone. And it's okay for that activity to then be a break activity, but sometimes we have to remind ourselves that that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal isn't for them to complete the bus puzzle, right? What we want is for them to learn, to continue learning. And sometimes that means increasing the expectations within the same activity or just getting a new activity altogether that addresses the next step of that long-term goal. So just to consider continually challenging your students and continually making sure that everybody's learning something. What we need to do is identify the barriers. So there used to be a wall here, and we need to smash those barriers, right? Well, and we're going to do that using tools. We see how this person here has a sledgehammer? That is a tool they used to smash down that barrier. What our friends need are lots and lots of tools. So what does that mean? Oops. So we're going to look at me to start with. So my long-term goal is to lower my blood pressure. I recently found out that I have high blood pressure. And the way that my doctor wants me to do that is to lose weight. So my short-term goal is to get, not necessarily to lose weight, because I don't like that terminology, but my goal is to move more. So I'm trying to get 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. So that's my short-term goal. Now let's look at how I'm going to achieve that. There's a woman named Karen Erickson who is absolutely amazing. Erickson with a CK. She wrote a book about literacy for AAC users, and it's awesome. I'll put the link somewhere. Actually, maybe Kim can put the link in the chat. In any case, so she has this resource, and she talks about different things that students are trying to learn and different factors, and divides them into sort of red, yellow, and green. Red is high demands, yellow is low demand, or sorry, medium demands, and green is low demands. So let's look at what this looks like in terms of my goal. Energy. My energy is a factor in getting this exercise. So I know that my energy is lowest in the evening. So that's going to be something that is very demanding for me. My energy sort of right after school is kind of medium, but my energy is best in the morning. So that is going to be the least demanding for me. In terms of my motivation, when it's cold and wet outside, I do not want to go outside. Some people are like, go exercise with friends. And you know what? That is not motivating for me. I would put that in the yellow zone. But green, the thing that really motivates me is getting to earn something, tracking in some ways, so having some sort of visualization of how much I'm doing, and having a good audiobook or some music to listen to. And the third factor is activity. Like, what activity exactly am I doing? There's a lot of things I hate doing. And so, you know, I didn't put that whole list in there. Okay, a yellow activity for me is running outside. I feel sort of medium about it. I did it during the pandemic. It's okay. I don't like love it. But green things that are low demands for me, things that I actually like doing are yoga, reformer Pilates, taiko, which is Japanese drumming, and I like walking. So let's think about this for a second. If I want to increase my activity, I need to look at these other factors, right? What we don't want is all red. If it's in the evening, it's cold and wet outside, it doesn't matter what activity it is. I am just like not going to do it, right? The further down I go, like towards the green, the more likely I am to do it and to do it consistently. So for green here, energy, if I do it in the morning, maybe I get to earn something and listen to some music or something and go on an activity I like doing. This is where I'm going to shine, right? This is where you're really going to see my potential. So maybe I need some tools to make sure that I'm doing things in this zone. So in terms of earning something, I've given myself a little calendar and I put a little stamp or a sticker on it every time I go. I have a subscription to Audible, and now I can have all the audiobooks I want. And I bought a membership to a Pilates studio so that I can go do that. And you know what? It's working. I'm doing the things. Oh, and I go in the morning. So those things are my tools to make sure that my short-term goal of getting enough exercise gets met. I hope this makes sense to you. Now, we are next going to talk about my friend Sajin. This is Sajin. He is at school in this picture. I've known him for a long time, and he is wonderful. But so we think about, you know, getting Sajin to sit down and do his work at school. So I've known him for a while, and this is kind of my perception of Sajin and our relationship. And somebody else that works with Sajin might have a different perception of what motivates him and his other factors that we're looking at here. But one thing that I've known about Sajin is that he doesn't like it if I come in and I'm sort of like fumbling with my materials and I'm like, you have to do this, right? What I do know is he likes movement. He's more likely to do something I've asked him to do if he chooses. And it might not be that he gets to choose the activity. It might be that I've brought 3 activities and he chooses the order that we do them in. He likes it when we use food. So often when we're working on like literacy, we'll choose materials that talk about food. When we're working on numeracy, he'll actually like use grapes and count grapes, and he gets to eat them, and he likes that. Um, when he knows the expectation, so we're using a visual schedule, or at least putting the 3 activities in the order that we're going to do them. And he really likes routines. Now, written output is quite difficult for him. So under red here, I've put printing, like actually printing things out. That's very difficult for him. Not just on like a spelling sort of place, but like actually physically coloring with, staying in the lines and even those kinds of things, like using his hand for those things is challenging for him. Whereas, he does a lot better with when he's typing, either on a keyboard or on his iPad. And in terms of communication, one thing that's really difficult for him is using a loud voice um, for speech, and then also his speech clarity. Those are very difficult things for him. But talking in single, quiet words is really much easier for him. So communication-wise, that's kind of like what he'll go to first. He's also really good at using his AAC system to produce single words. He can also produce phrases in his AAC system. So when we look at this and we think about, okay, what are some tools that Sajid needs? What are his barriers? What are his tools? When we think about the written output, when a tool might be for him to have some sort of keyboard, whether it's a laptop or an iPad, right? When it comes to communication, having that AAC system, he may choose in the moment to use his single words, like his mouth words, to produce single words, and that's absolutely okay. I might then model in a phrase for him so that he's continuing to expand his language, and that he'll have more language as he gets ready to leave school. But having that AAC system can be a tool to support both his written output and his communication. Now, these other things that we have here are also things that we could use. These are just strategies. They don't need anything special. We might want to use a visual support so that he knows the expectation. That could be a tool. But these are the things that we can work on to develop and expand on to make sure that he's continuing to learn and be successful. And as we gently progress our goals and gently increase the difficulty of some of the things we're working on, we're going to shift some of these red things down possibly, right, into maybe the yellow zone, depending on what our goals are and things like that. We might also expand things that are in this yellow zone, things that he can do. Won't necessarily naturally do them himself, but if he needed to, he could. Like being able to communicate in phrases and sentences, it's really important so that people know what you're thinking, right? Like if he got in trouble and needed to ask for help, right? Like that's something he needs to be able to do. But also if something fun happened and he was like, hey, mom, I want to tell you about this thing, we can do that better when we have phrases and sentences. You can also think about your students and red, yellow, greens for this, and think about, we're doing this thing. He absolutely hates it. It's really red zone for him. Sorry, this is also confusing because the zones of regulation, I know, but yeah, maybe it's really red for somebody. What is our goal with printing? If it's so hard for him, and we think about the long-term goal, like why not just teach him typing, right? Like those kinds of questions you can ask yourself, not in like a printing is better than typing because I said so kind of way, but like what is the long-term goal? What is the long-term goal for this student that's different from me, that's different from this other student? And how can we continue to develop this to be more meaningful in their life, to develop that typing and give them more skills around the typing? So that's all the presentation I had for you. Thank you so much. I have a QR code here for you, and this takes you to our blog, and you can download the slides from there and things like that. Does anybody have any questions before we log off?
I just want to say thank you guys. That was great. This is Kim. And
Hi, Kim.
I really liked your part about the talking. I'm an OT for those who haven't met. The really rethinking hand over hand. And I understand why it's
Yeah,
so commonly used and stuff but yeah, really thinking about body autonomy and stuff. I just liked how you laid it all out. So thank you so much. This was excellent.
thanks, Kim.
I'll just add, thank you, Greco. for inviting me today, and great presentation. I really learned quite a few little tips and tricks in there, and all the information. And thanks for including Sajin.
Thanks, Sajin's mom.
Hi, Reiko. This is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
I'm also one of the OTs, and I want to say thank you so much for doing this. And I also love the way you were able to use the red, yellow, and green to really think about tasks and modifying parts of those tasks and thinking about all the elements. I find it to be such a useful tool, and I think that's a really big takeaway. And I love the way you applied it to something that many of us are working on in our lives, because it's true of many of the things that we try to accomplish. There's
Right.
things that push us along in the right way, and there's things that hold us back. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.